Martin, welcome to Breakfast.
Thank you.
Martin, Indyk, in 1996, you were advising the then Democrat United States President Bill Clinton on the Middle East, and Benjamin Netanyahu was the Israeli Prime Minister. Here we are again, 13 years later. Netanyahu is Prime Minister, and there's another Democrat president in the White House. What's changed in the meantime?
Well, actually, I served in Israel as ambassador when Bibi Netanyahu was the Prime Minister, so I had many hours with him. And it's a big question as to what has changed on his side. I think what's changed on the American side is that Barack Obama, like Bill Clinton, wants to commit his presidency and the prestige of his high office to achieving a breakthrough to peace in the Middle East, but he's focused on the Palestinians. We, with Bill Clinton, were focused on the Syrians. And there is a difference, a fairly significant difference between Obama's position and Netanyahu's position. Obama believes, as did President Bush before him, that there needs to be an independent Palestinian state created alongside Israel living in peace and security with the Jewish state. That is the view of the overwhelming international community. But Netanyahu...
It is not the view of Benjamin Netanyahu.
Well, it appears not to be. It certainly was the view of Ariel Sharon, for instance, a former Likud leader, and the recent right-wing Prime Minister, or centre-right Prime Minister, Ehud Olmert. But Netanyahu has a rump Likud party. Those who supported an independent Palestinian state kind of moved with Sharon to the centrist Kadima party. And I think he is a pragmatist, much like Obama, but he faces a right-wing party, his own, and parties to the right of him in his coalition, who do not believe that an independent Palestinian state is a viable solution.
That's an important part of what's changed in that 13-year period too, isn't it? The makeup of the Knesset. I mean, it is primarily a right-wing Knesset.
Yes, but last time he had also a narrow right-wing coalition. This time he has the Labour Party in it. But nevertheless, he's taking a hawkish position on this. It's in a way an indefensible position. It's too smart by half. What he basically seems to be saying, and that's what I've heard from him and his advisors, is the Palestinian state that he can accept is a state minus control over its airspace, control over its borders, control over its airwaves, because that would jeopardize Israeli security. He's preoccupied with this because when Israel withdrew unilaterally from Gaza, it got rockets on Israel's civilian population, and he can't afford for that to happen in the West Bank.
Well, of course, a state minus control of its airspace and its borders is not a state.
Well, there are plenty of states.
It might be an economic entity.
No, there are plenty of states that have qualified sovereignty. This is where he's too clever by half, is that if he would endorse an independent Palestinian state and then negotiate what's necessary for Israel's security, everybody could understand that, because security has to be part of the deal. But to come out and say he's not for it, or he's for a state minus, just emphasizes what the Palestinians are not going to get, and therefore doesn't make it very attractive for them to come to the negotiating table.
While it was very noticeable that Prime Minister Netanyahu didn't mention a two-state solution last week in Washington, while standing next to him the President did, the US President did, some say privately that Benjamin Netanyahu is not so opposed. What's your view?
Well, he's not, but Netanyahu is a creature of politics, and he's basically trying to walk between the raindrops here. Not anger his right wing, and not anger the President of the United States. He cannot afford, and he learnt this during the last time he was Prime Minister in the 1990s, to allow a lot of daylight to show between him and the President of the United States, because he will be punished by that, by an Israeli electorate that understands the paramount importance of maintaining a good relationship with the United States. On the other hand, he doesn't want his government to come down as a result of a right-wing revolt. Yeah. So he tries to please everybody, and I'm afraid that, just as last time, he'll end up pleasing nobody.
It's early days, but there are some early signs too, beyond what he didn't say at that White House press conference last week. Overnight, Benjamin Netanyahu has announced that Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank will be allowed to grow or expand, despite clear US opposition to that. That's hardly a move in the direction of trying to close that gap.
It's interesting. Here again, it's another example of what I just said. He's also said that he will dismantle the illegal or unauthorised settlement outposts.
In fact, they've moved on that too over the weekend.
They've dismantled one minor one. The previous government of Ehud Olmert and Sharon made this commitment to President Bush but never fulfilled it. Netanyahu appears to want to fulfill it, and that will bring him into direct confrontation with the settlers. He's trying to buy them off by telling them, well, in the existing authorized settlements, you'll be able to expand, you'll be able to have natural growth. And that's something that Obama opposes. So I'm afraid that yet again we're going to see a situation where he earns the wrath of the settlers, and the President of the United States will not be happy because the governments of Israel, successive governments, have committed to a settlements freeze, including natural growth.
It's 8:13 on Breakfast. Our guest this morning in the Breakfast studio is the former US ambassador to Israel, Martin Indyk. Martin, you mentioned there the Israeli Prime Minister's natural concerns about security, and we have the example of what happened last time when they pulled out of Gaza. But it's a difficult thing to get right, isn't it? How do you make Israel safe? You can understand why they'd want to do that. And how do you make the Palestinians free? And certainly it's hard to see it happening when Gaza remains under such tight control. I mean, that's going to work against that, isn't it? Because Palestinians will always be wanting to flex in anger.
Yes, and it's a issue that also affects the ability of the Palestinians to negotiate, because they're now deeply divided between Hamas and Fatah. Hamas is in control in Gaza. That's not acceptable to the Israeli government. By the way, it's not acceptable to Fatah, which controls the West Bank with the help of the Israelis. And so as long as there is that division, and as long as you point out, Gaza is in effect under a kind of tight blockade or siege, it's going to be very hard for the Palestinian moderates to negotiate peace with Israel, because they'll be looking over their shoulder at Hamas, which will oppose them and accuse them of being traitors for making any compromise with Israel. And the Hamas has the ability to blow the whole thing up by launching the rockets again, which Netanyahu will respond to with force, and then we won't have a peace negotiation, we'll have another conflict instead.
Last time we spoke, it was coinciding with an international conference where there was a strong view being put forward that Hamas should be a part of any negotiations. As you say, not even Fatah is at that point yet. What signs, what hopes do you see that of any kind of unified Palestinian response in the near future?
There is a concerted effort underway by the Egyptians to try to reconcile Hamas and Fatah. The deal that they're trying to put together is one in which Fatah would have ministers, Hamas would have ministers in a government with Fatah, kind of national unity government, but those ministers would accept negotiations with Israel and recognition of previous agreements and so on. But Hamas itself would not. That's a kind of finesse which it's possible that the Obama administration would accept. But the reality is the Egyptians have been trying to push this and have not succeeded. Fatah and Hamas remain deeply divided. It's just one of the problems that Obama is going to face in trying to achieve this two-state solution.
You mentioned Syria earlier. Well, now over the week, last few days anyway, the Israeli Prime Minister has also stated his willingness to reopen talks with Syria, something I think he did try to do last time he was office. Handing back the Golan Heights, though, is a precondition of Syria's. Well, it's interesting. What's the chances?
In a shameless promotion of my book, as I outlined there, Netanyahu actually negotiated with the Syrians behind the back of Bill Clinton, who was trying to get him to fulfill his commitments on the Palestinian side. And they went a long way in those negotiations. But they went a long way because Netanyahu had his mediator, his envoy to Damascus, convey a commitment to a full withdrawal to the, quote, a line based on the line of June 4th, 1967. Now Netanyahu says he wants negotiations with Syria, but he won't come off the Golan Heights. He knows very well that that's a non-starter. And I wonder whether that's a smokescreen for the kind of secret negotiations that he held with the Syrians in the past, for which he told me he was very proud at the time, because he did make significant progress. And the Syrians, I've just been in Damascus 3 weeks ago, they think that they can do a deal with Netanyahu precisely because he's a right-wing leader, because they had a good experience with him last time, and because they believe that if he cuts the deal, the other political parties to the left of him will support him and he'll have a clear majority in Israel for it.
Okay, so you believe he could have a real plan, where I know there's other critics of Netanyahu say it's a smokescreen just to distract from the inaction in Palestinians in the Palestinian territories.
Yeah, well, it could be that too.
Martin, thank you very much for your time. It's a pleasure to have you in the studio.
Thanks, Fran.